Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, and anybody who's tuning in for the first time. Today's episode got a great character in the industry, Guillaume Halleux, and I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that, but as we're greeting each other, I think the hello term will be acceptable.
There
Guillaume.
you go. No problem, Chris. No problem.
Thank you, sir. Now, Guillaume is the Chief Officer Cargo for Qatar Airways Cargo. Great to have you on board. Thanks very much for coming on, Guillaume.
Thank you. My pleasure. Finally, we can do this, right? We started pre-COVID, and finally we found a way.
Exactly. Now, just very, very quickly, Guillaume, can you just let our listeners know what is your overall responsibilities and what you're accountable for?
Okay. Well, I'm in charge of the cargo activity of Qatar Airways. Of the airline. That means the cargo loads and sales of the passenger fleet and the management of a fleet of 28 freighters. Qatar Airways roughly carries 50% of our tonnage is on the passenger side and 50% is on our freighters. So I'm accountable for the sales, distribution, network planning, and obviously operation of that.
Yeah, so one of the biggest cargo men in the industry.
Well, I don't know if I'm the biggest man, but definitely Qatar Airways is one of the biggest player.
Yeah, no, very successful at it as well. Now, Guillaume, obviously everybody's fully aware of the impact on the industry of this damn virus, and also, you know, very, very respectful and mindful of all of the frontline people that have put themselves in front of harm's way for the good of everybody else. So with that in mind, and also with the fact that this new normal term is becoming very, very overused, we're trying to create a new term now, which is planned positives. Mm-hmm. Now, an organisation like your own, which I know from firsthand, always fast, always quick to do things new, innovative, etc. I mean, you guys were there right from the very beginning. I can remember even during the worst times of the lockdown, and I'd look up, and if there was an aircraft in the sky, it had Qatar written underneath it. So you guys kept the wheels running and turning, and you did an awful lot of good for so many countries. How much activity were you carrying on now during the whole process?
Okay, so indeed we've been very busy. As I remember, as we saw countries after countries, closing their borders and shutting down their operations, we basically looked at every opportunity to keep flying and to stay in the air. So a couple of things. Our freighters, 28 freighters, operating 70 to 75 flights per day. That was pre-COVID, and it is still the case today. I mean, freighter utilization has been at the highest in Qatar Airways, so that hasn't changed. On the passenger side, the company decided to maintain roughly 50 flights per day. They were all operating with, honestly, very limited number of packs on board, but they were all operating because of cargo. Cargo was the lifeline of those flights, and that's about 50 per day. And as the borders closed down and the belly capacity disappeared from the market, we ramped up a number of passenger freighters, which are technically passenger aircraft operated with no packs, only for cargo in the belly. And that was up to 110 per day. So at the peak of the peak during the COVID, we operated 180 flights per day for cargo only, cargo flights. Normally, Qatar Airways pre-COVID was 500 to 600 flights per day. So you see, that still gives you a scale of what happened. So we suffered as a company, like everybody else. I mean, there's no denial. We suffered because our passengers are not there, and PAX is the core business of this company. Cargo is a side activity, a big one, bigger than many other airlines, but still not the core activity of the group.
Yeah. No, exactly. Now, with that in mind, and some of the things that you had to adapt to, so with relationships with handling agents in all those destinations, offloading, different time on the ground, etc. How difficult was that to do?
Honestly, it was okay. It was okay. I think the whole industry realized that something bigger than all of us was happening. So the whole industry really put together any sort of actions, any sort of new processes in order to be reactive. I mean, example, the Chinese civil aviation, right? Pre-COVID, it was taking up to 2 weeks to obtain a charter right.
Yeah.
During COVID, you would just send your guy with the sealed envelope of the documents, for the application. You would give them at the door of the Chinese Civil Aviation. They would let you know, say within 24 hours we'll be back to you, but consider it approved. And honestly, those approvals came in like pretty not even overnight, in a few hours. So that was one example. Other examples are handling agents everywhere. I mean, we have been in intense discussions with our friends at Dinata, WFS, Swissport, Menzies, just to name the big ones, but obviously Hactol in Hong Kong, Pactol in Shanghai, or Fraport in Germany. All those companies have gone above and beyond to facilitate our flights for two reasons. I would say three reasons. Number one, because we have a strong relationship. Number two, because what we did was, and you will hear me say that a lot, we were saving lives during those months. We didn't transport cargo anymore. We didn't transport fast fashion or high tech. We were transporting equipment to help the nurses and the doctors, and to save patients, respirators and so on and so forth. So everybody wants to be part of a success story, and everybody wants to be a hero. So those ground handling agents were really strongly supportive of our efforts. And last but not least, everybody was bleeding money.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, everyone, airports, ground handlers, airlines, everyone was bleeding money, and our little cargo activity was the only source of revenue for many, many actors. So I dare to say it was not at all business as usual. Things were much faster, much stronger, a lot more reactive than normal. And it's not only because our name is Qatar Airways and we're the biggest cargo carrier in the world. It's because it was the right thing to do. I think there was no debate. It just came naturally to all of us as an industry.
No, I agree. And those 3 points are very valid. Also, back in February, you guys were actually flying and sending relief goods and PPE and all sorts to China.
Yeah. The same goods that we carried back to Europe a month later. So I mean, this is really part of the diplomacy, I would say, of Qatar and the soft power that the country is doing. We have supported a lot of countries. So initially it was China. If you remember, back in February, the whole world was looking at China saying, oh God, China is sick. But no one was really aware, or no one really understood how badly the rest of the world would get hit as well later on. So it was supporting China like every other government did. I mean, if I recall properly, the German government, the French government, the British government also sent aid and relief to the Chinese people, using military airplanes or charters. So the Qataris were not the only ones, but we did that to a certain extent because of our size. One day we had 5 freighters departing back to back as a convoy into China to Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing, if I recall correctly. So for the flight radar fans, that was a great image. But yeah, we did that, and then a few weeks later, we did the opposite from China back to the world.
Exactly. I mean, it's crazy. It's such a terrible thing. And you said about everybody with their eyes on China, not realizing how quickly it was going to turn up in their own backyard. I think that's also taught many. Well, it's taught every company lessons. How quickly and how damaging something like that can be on business, which is why now everybody's focusing a little bit more, quite rightly so, on sustainability, continuity, looking at risk in a different light. And it's so important to work out, how long an organization can survive. So, maybe some of the profitability criteria will change in the future, hopefully, as well. Now, with that in mind, and you mentioned about the speed of response and decision making, as far as collaboration is concerned, that's something that I think would be great if it continues moving forward, because you mentioned charters, and people don't realize that a charter isn't like a passenger flight. Invariably, it goes in one direction and then hopefully it goes somewhere else to make up. So for these, for a bit more open sky approach and people's understanding of the business, I think it's done the world of good for cargo at the moment.
I think this crisis has revealed two things. It has revealed, again, that the world is a village.
Yeah.
and that we, the air freight people, we are the main street of that village. Everybody goes through it at some point, but nobody really realizes it. The last time that the world discovered air freight was that Iceland volcanic ash crisis in Europe, close to 10 years ago, right? If you remember.
Yeah, I remember it well. Yeah, I was stranded in Spain.
Okay, well, I was in Hong Kong at that time. I lived in Hong Kong, and it made the headline of the Hong Kong newspapers that the Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong was short of flowers to decorate the lobby, and they had no oysters because these two commodities came by air freight from France and Holland into Hong Kong. But the world at that point discovered the importance of air freight. During this COVID crisis, same thing.
Yeah.
The world realized that we have become a village, that your Panadol, your simple tablet of headache medicine is manufactured 10,000 kilometers away from you, and it is only possible because there is logistics between you and that factory, right? This is the first thing. The second thing that this crisis has revealed is how obsolete our industry regulation has become.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And then I turn to IATA, to ICAO, to all the regulators in the world. It has really shown that our industry is based on protectionism, and is based on regulations that are dated from close to 100 years ago, or maybe not that much, but maybe 50 plus, easy, and have become really a concern. And I'll give one example. It is not very politically correct, but we were one of the very few carriers able to bring massive capacity to a market. We applied for temporary rights into a small country below sea level to the northern side of France and Belgium. We got those rights on a temporary basis, valid for 1 week.
Yeah.
And then a lot of lobbying happened. And all of a sudden, we lost those rights into that airport, which really was a pity for that country because, again, at that moment, we were the only one carrying decent capacity. Decent capacity meaning, in a snap of a finger, an airline like us can bring 10, 20 additional freighters per week into your airport if you want to.
Yeah.
We have that leverage. And so because of that mentality and way of thinking, we lost those rights. And what did we do? We redeployed our capacity to more friendly airports. That's really not a big problem. But this has to change at some point. Right, that the sky is free, and that in moments like this, when you're not fighting to make business, you're fighting to carry goods as much as you can to help people. This was not a fight on a tender during an RFQ. This was really bringing goods. That was what matters. And even in those moments, the mentality of protectionism prevailed, and that really, to me, was a big revelation of the state of mind of our industry, or certain elements of our industry in these days.
But it's great. I agree with you. I think it's great. I just don't think it makes sense. And I think maybe one of the models that will come out of this, and it's something that I've definitely been talking a lot about, is I think airports now have got an opportunity to define themselves as their own ecosystem to attract customers, being the carriers and everybody else. And if they get that right, with all of their handling agents and everything else, and they make it attractive for carriers, they'll bring an awful lot more business to that particular unit. And I think they need to focus now getting together, because even when you go into certain airports, you've got the airports, the carriers, the handling agents, other parties, they don't seem to be collaborating and as cohesive as they should be. And I think they could make a huge, huge difference in the future if they came together as a unit.
Yes.
So,
absolutely. But again, I mean, the regulations that govern the world of aviation today are necessary. We need regulation, obviously, but I think this crisis has really revealed that it was time to do a big cleanup in how we operate as an industry.
No, I totally agree. And the speed at which certain things have been done have been fantastic, and it should encourage them now to look at everything and look at the legacy of waste and all the problems that were there before, because now more than ever, everybody needs to be more efficient. Cash flow is important. Margins matter. So all the things that people were assuming were part and parcel of the luggage you had to carry around on everyday business, that's gone now. It's all about lightweight, streamlining. Incredible. Now,
Yep.
can I ask you another thing, Guillaume? One of the things that has definitely come out of this as well is you've got QHSS and E, okay, but the H, for occupational health, or now I think ever more is going to have emphasis on hygiene. So although people, ever since you've been a child, your parents used to say, wash your hands before dinner, wash your hands afterwards, brush your teeth, all the things. And every now and again, you'd let those things slip. But now, more than ever, especially now with some of the regulations of masks having to be worn in public and on public transport, people are becoming more aware of it. Do you think the hygiene issue can be the catalyst to change one of the other waste legacies and problems that we've had, which is to do with paperless and digitization and getting things to be more well, should we say more modern?
Honestly, no, I don't think so. I think going paperless, which is okay, that forever debate of the air freight industry having missed the digitalization train and so on. It's not because you have an envelope of papers in your hands. You're right. I really don't think that's going to change anything. However, if the topic is digitalization, I think this crisis has again revealed how opaque our industry is and how complicated it is. I mean, I've had doctors on the phone. I had directors of hospitals on the phone calling me because they saw Qatar Airways planes in Paris or in Liège. So, call Qatar Airways because it looks, as per the news, the 6 p.m. news, it looks like this airline is bringing goods to your country. So they find their way with social media today. It's quite easy, and my mobile phone is nothing private. It's public information. I get these calls of people asking me, how do I do? Well, you've got to go through a freight forwarder. Yeah. Okay, what do they do, and how and why, and I mean, it's so complicated. And people are used to Amazon. They're used to FedEx. They're used to, I want to buy a book. I go online, I click here, and it gets delivered to my home. I don't care who does what. This is, as a consumer, this is transparent to me. These guys, those doctors who paid with their own money to bring masks for their own clinics or their own staff could not even do it because they said, I'm going to, people made offers to me. I'm going to pay you. No, you can't. I mean, you need a freight forwarder to clear customs in China. How do I find one? Well, we can recommend one. It's so complicated. The world of tomorrow, Chris, where the same doctor goes online to a marketplace and says, okay, I've got my supplier in Guangdong, in the Guangdong province. Location is there. He's telling me that origin airport is that. And I go online and I find a freight forwarder because they will always be needed, but I find one. It's easy, it's transparent. I transact online, I pay with my credit card, and that's it. This is what this crisis has again revealed: the crying lack of transparency in our business. I'll give you another example because that drove me nuts. when the price went up, it went up super quick, right? I've never seen that in my life. Going that high, that quick. So from a certain amount to double that amount in less than 2 days, and to double again and to double again, blah, blah, blah. You know the story.
Yeah.
So at some point, we had a meeting. I mean, we met on a daily basis with the management team of Qatar Airways. And at some point, very quickly, we realized, guys, we can't do this anymore. We cannot make insane money on the back of people who are dying. So we established 2 price lists. Yeah. There was one price list that followed the market, and that was the expensive one. And that one was for commodities that was non-COVID related, because Feb, March, we were still moving, high-tech, fast fashion, and other goods that were not related to COVID. So for that, you pay the market price. Yeah. And for COVID-related goods, I'll give you a 50% discount on that market price. And of course, guess what happened? So the intention was to not to abuse and was to support. But guess what happened? All of a sudden, you had charters booked at the COVID price, which is 50% less, with 10 tons of medical equipment on board. Yeah. The remaining 90 tons were commercial goods.
Yeah. Yeah.
you see me coming, right? And
Yeah,
again,
no,
this
I
is an example of
100%. Yeah,
transparency and opacity. I mean, lack of transparency in our industry. And I think this is going to become an increasing problem.
yeah. And what you've just touched on there, pre-COVID, you've got similar issues with certain commodities that shouldn't be in general cargo, and people just doing it from certain areas to bypass because it's relatively easy to do so. So the digitalization or the transparency, I think, is such a huge and important area. And if you map out the amount of steps where efficiencies or where something positive could be done to reduce the complexity of it, there is so many opportunities, Guillaume.
Mm-hmm. Of
And it's
course.
madness. It's madness that people don't all get together now and start to do things that make sense. And how good would it be if the scenario that you just described was available to everybody every day? It would also help them understand the business a little bit more. And we also have to get world customs, to be a little bit more dynamic with some of the issues. You know, it doesn't make sense that you have to have a piece of paper with blue ink on it instead of black ink, and
Yep.
certain values. It's crazy now.
So you're getting there more and more with customs. Customs is really not my concern. The lack of transparency of the industry is the DNA of this industry. I mean, let's call a spade, Chris.
Yeah.
The freight forwarding business thrived for years and decades on two elements: the lack of transparency of the market and the ignorance of the shippers.
Yep.
I'm not saying that freight forwarders were or are, how shall I say, gangsters. I'm just saying that there was a portion of that industry that really took advantage of the lack of transparency, meaning you could tell stories to your shipper because that information was not available. Oh, I'm sorry, sir, the British Airways flight was cancelled. But in reality, gave the cargo to a cheaper non-direct service and kept the difference in the pocket. Those scenarios were daily back in the days.
Yeah.
That's not possible anymore with the internet.
Yeah.
Incompetency of shippers. There was a time when in big corporations, which I cannot name, the shipping department was where you put all the people who failed their career, right? So all the alcoholic, all the depressive people would end up in the shipping department. That was way back, but it was a reality because it was not the core business. It was the core business of no industry whatsoever.
Yeah.
Oil and gas, fashion, perfume, cosmetics, whatever. Shipping is not the core business. Well, shipping has become a strategic benefit, a strategic advantage for those industries. If you look at Louis Vuitton, the Louis Vuitton group, their supply chain department is now an army of engineers, super smart, equipped with the best tools possible, looking at supply chain strategies and so on. They are not ignorant anymore. So that those two dimensions, those two pillars of the market have totally changed. Transparency came from the digitalization, and incompetency disappeared from the shipper perspective, forcing now the freight forwarding industry to really reinvent themselves. And what value can they bring, and do they bring? They are still needed. We know that they are needed. We cannot do without freight forwarders, and we love our freight forwarders, but they must reinvent themselves.
Yeah, collectively within the whole spectrum.
Yes.
And you're talking about people knowing their business. Inditex is another one. My goodness me, they know so much. They're tough guys when you have to negotiate with them.
Yes. Back to my point. I used Louis Vuitton, but I could have used Inditex. I could have used Novartis. I could have used every industry. Those big names in the automotive business is the same.
Yeah, and quite rightly so. It's good that they put pressure on like that. Now, as far as the collaboration element, you think there's a possibility now to start making these improvements?
I think these improvements will be forced on us. I think they will come through technology. Technology, we cannot stop it. There will be a player one day that will manage to penetrate the market in a scalable way, and that will bring transparency, and that will connect people that were not connected before.
Yeah. So
and that no one can stop it. So either you look the other way and you ignore it, and then you're dead, or you embark, and
Yeah.
and you actually try to make it as good as possible for us as an industry. But I think it's happening. It was late because there were so many forces that resisted in the past. Why? Because technology was not entirely there. Was expensive. So the barriers to enter that market were still there, and very strong resistance from the players in the market, resistance from the freight forwarders, resistance from the airlines who didn't like to change the model, who were scared of the KLM syndrome from 20 years ago, of going after shippers. I'm not saying that all airlines want to go after shippers. All I'm saying is that we will not prevent the fact that shippers will demand and have access to more transparency in the market. And I think I see some forwarders smart enough have already embraced that and have already partnered with some technology companies and are going down that path. So this is coming. And I think this crisis, this COVID, will act as an accelerator of the trend. It existed before, but I think it's just going to go faster.
Yeah, 100%. And the lead, follow or fall off is something that people should be aware of. And it's time now that the industry collectively started to lead instead of being forced. So that's so important. Another issue, and on a positive, now, pre-COVID, everybody was aware of the statistics, the numbers, the amount of firsts that Qatar achieved. How does the model look now coming out of COVID? Because every other major carrier over the last 3 to 5 to 6 weeks, and probably for the next couple of weeks, will be establishing what right sizing looks like. So you've got lots of people in the industry, through no fault of their own, are going to be displaced. And how's that affecting the
same? I mean, I can only quote our CEO, Mr. Al Baker, who mentioned to the press last week that Qatar Airways will be looking at cutting 20% of their manpower. 20% is not a small number. That would more or less equate to roughly 10,000 people in the world, which is totally in line with the big carriers in the rest of the world and the big players in this industry. So this is nothing new. Look, again, can't deny the reality. We are being affected in a massive way, in a drastic way, with huge drop in our passenger numbers, partly compensated by our cargo activity, but only partly. Right. So when it comes to our cargo business, how do we prepare tomorrow? Well, a number of things. We are in a unique setup in the sense that we operate 28 freighters. So that alone is a small to mid-size airline in our cargo business, the freighter fleet alone. So we are redesigning our freighter network in order to compensate for the losses of capacity in key markets due to passenger slowdown. That's the first thing. The second thing, we're looking at rationalization of our freighter fleet for better maintenance solutions, as well as better pilot solutions. So we need to rationalize all that in order to be more efficient. We're using that as an excuse to put more technology into it, clearly, with implementation of projects that were on the table before, but really not with a super high priority. So that has taken higher priority. And most importantly, we are preparing a world where my freighter fleet will be self-sustainable, where pre-COVID, the job of my freighters were to bring cargo to the hub to feed the passenger flights. Right? Qatar is not a place that exports anything much. Contrary to Germany or to Europe in general, let's say, or obviously to China. So we need to bring cargo to feed the hub. And that's what the freighters do. They bring cargo, feed the hub in order to fill the bellies of the passenger flights. Less passenger flights, then the freighters must auto-fill themselves, And so this is a big revolution for us. And we are preparing that, obviously, to be ready just in case the catch up of the passenger business is not as fast as we thought it would be in the beginning.
Yeah, 100%. Now, the reason I brought the subject up is because it's such a sensitive issue for people that are displaced, and it doesn't comfort them by explaining the realities of business and life. And even though people are saying, people are making so much money and now they're laying people off, the whole point is this continuity and sustainability. So you have to be able to manage the future, otherwise everybody is going to be laid off. And whilst it's very hard to accept, I think in some cases, that the type of communication is so important to go out to people. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to push and drive is all of these people, the selection or how they're going to be displaced. So if we take pilots, or you take, some people with a lot of experience, that experience then is going to be lost to the industry for some time. But if they're lucky enough, and I'm sure many of them will be, to get positions in different industries, those industries will also appreciate the value of the aviation industry because of the quality of the people, the training, the focus on safety and security, quality, etc. All the things that are the pillars of success for aviation. Now, if there was a way to give a sort of a soft landing, or to let people know that we appreciate what you've done, there may be a chance in the future, is if when people were being let go, they were still associated to an organisation or the industry by being able to continue online, keeping up their training, their awareness, what was going on, so that in a few years, when things hopefully, please God, start to improve, that they would be the first ones that would be welcomed back because they've maintained their understanding, their appreciation, licensing, etc. Do you think there's any merits in that?
Yes, of course. There's never any merit in burning bridges, right? With your customers, with your business partners, or with your boss or your employees. So definitely. The uniqueness of this is that we know this will come back. We know the business will come back because at the end of the day, the world, the new normal, as we call it now, might be different. But at the end of the day, there are some fundamentals. People need to travel because, again, the world has become a village. Maybe less, maybe not as much as before, but still there will be a need for travel. There will be a need for commodities to be transported from A to B. Maybe not as much as before because of short sourcing, because of relocation of factories. But still, there will always be a need. So it's not like we're selling a product that could become totally obsolete, like photography films, like in the past. We're selling a service that will, in the foreseeable future of next hundreds of years, will be needed. So the difficulty is, how do you right size your manpower requirements today to what you can afford today with the cost, knowing that those skills are complicated to obtain. There's a lot of training in our industry. There's a lot of qualification, certification. Pilots is one thing, but look at the technical side. The maintenance side, for example. You don't invent yourself a certified engineer, right? You got to go to school. You got to get your diploma, blah blah blah. You don't invent yourself a loadmaster in cargo. It takes a fair bit of training and certification. So how do you make sure you don't lose all that? Honestly, I don't always have the answer to that, Chris, to be frank. What I believe in is full transparency in the communication with our staff, because you can't lie to them. People are not stupid. They see what's going on. They know what's going on. They read the press the same as I do. So they know what's going on. And yes, if the business is such that we need to let go X% of our manpower, we will do that. We can find mitigation in some cases, talking to our GHAs or GSAs and see if they don't have a job for them. But it's an industry problem. It's not just an airline having an issue. It's not like Qatar Airways is doing bad in a blooming environment. No, it's the whole environment that's going down. So it really is tough. I only believe in being honest with everybody, and then you got to do what you got to do and what's good for your family. You must also understand that, and of course, personally, here in Qatar, the majority of our workforce is not from Qatar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you lose your job here, it's not like you can live nearby and drop by the office on a regular basis and keep contact. No, you must exit the country,
Yeah.
and you must relocate to your home country.
Yeah.
So keeping tab is a bit difficult in such an environment.
Yeah, that's why maybe I didn't make it clear. My reference is, from the regulators or the representative bodies, that they should or they could provide a platform that anybody that's been displaced in the industry could still tab in or have a free pass to get free training, etc. So whether it's IATA, the ARCA, FDAXA, any of the representative bodies, just to allow these people to keep associated with the industry that most people, when they come into this industry, they find it very, very difficult to leave. So it's just just something that could be done perhaps by the representative bodies.
That would work. That at industry level, that would work for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. No. That is for sure. That is for sure.
Yeah. Good. Now, I'm just thinking for something here on an upbeat, but quite a shocking reality. Football came back on this weekend here in the UK, soccer, and I was really excited to watch it. And then when it came on, it was so disappointing, without the crowds and without the atmosphere. It was such a weird thing. However, it's back on and it's great. And obviously everybody knows about the World Cup. So that's quite an exciting thing. So all of these big events to give people the opportunity to look forward to. How are things going with the World Cup plans?
Well, I mean, I can only say from what I see living here in Qatar, they are building stadiums like crazy. There was a bit of slowdown with the construction due to COVID, like in the rest of the world. But exactly. I think a couple of weeks ago they went back full force, and they are well ahead of the timeline anyway. I think they've already delivered more than 2 or 3 stadiums fully operational for the World Cup. So yeah, I mean the country is getting ready for that. A lot of infrastructure. I mean, for those of your listeners who have come to Qatar recently, they can see the country is a construction site. They're just building everything everywhere for the World Cup and for after. So it is like the momentum for the state of Qatar for the moment. Of course, everybody is talking about, COVID, no COVID, what would be the impact, Olympic Games being postponed by a year in a different format. Let's all hope that by 2022, we have a vaccine in place and this whole story is behind us. Let's really hope that. Otherwise, it's going to be really a big problem.
Yeah, but like I said, please God, inshallah, we have to hope that there'll be some vaccine, because that's going to be the game breaker. But it's so important for these big events to keep people attached and excited.
Of course.
For one, I'm looking forward to the Rugby Lions tour next year in South Africa. Things like that. Then you've got the Olympics. You've got so many things that bring people together. So please God, everything will be up and running by then. Now, Guillaume, we're almost at the end of the session. I've got to say, you're a very interesting man to talk to. You've got a good sense of humour. People don't appreciate how good it is, but they weren't with us a few minutes before we started. But I'll always remember that. So when I see you, I'll always smile. I'm definitely going to use your saying, the world is a village and cargo is the main street. So I'm going to steal that from you. I'm going to use it whenever I can.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Obviously, having spent some time in Qatar myself, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I wish you all well, great success, and look forward to seeing you sometime face to face at some event. And again, thank you so much for your feedback.
Thank you.
And also, thank you very much for listening to you. I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Chris. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.